But our first speaker is Dr. Ali Allawi, known to many of you all, and as I mentioned early on, he has just published a book which has just come out from Yale University Press, The Crisis of Islamic Civilization. And I'm sure most of you all will join us here on Monday when he will unpack that book for us. But he also published about 2 years ago, a very successful book on Iraq, a sort of insider account, the occupation of Iraq. It was called Winning the War but Losing the Peace. And he's also has another book which is going to come out soon. And this is going to cover the political biography of Faisal I of Iraq, which is set against the fall of the Ottoman Empire and the formation of the modern state system in the Middle East and Iraq. That book is due in the autumn of 2010. You can see he's been quite busy in recent times. But many of you all may have also seen the fact that he played a very big role in post-war Iraq, where he was 2 years ago, about 18 months ago more precisely, the Minister of Finance. Prior to that, the Minister of Trade, Minister of Defense. I think, to my knowledge, he's one of the few ministers where political parties have to kneel down and beg him to become a minister and virtually run and beg him to be a minister. That tells a lot about Dr. Ali Allawi. I must say I enjoyed his company last year when I was in England. We did something which was done in the classical era but is fading away at the moment, of reading chapters to each other. But he would read the chapters and I would listen. And that was a wonderful exercise of where people could get together of heart. And I think just listen to ideas, share ideas, engage with each other. And I think that's what makes this meeting, this coming together so special. I call it the netocracy of hearts, this beautiful network of hearts and minds coming together. So it's a pleasure once again to have a wonderful heart, a wonderful mind, a wonderful being, Dr. Ali Allawi, who will take us to another level today on the subject of supplication, or as it's known in Arabic, dua, amongst the classical Sufis. Dr. Ali Allawi, the floor is yours.
So if I can just, once again, please, can you all take out your phones, look at them, and make sure that they're switched off or on silent.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وبه نستعين. Thank you very much, Iqbal, for this introduction. I won't take issue with it, so we'll move on. The subject of the talk is really not what I'm going to talk about, because I think this this topic was assigned to me not really with my full awareness of its, but I'm going to take certain extracts from it and build my talk partly by being loyal to the title itself. And I will focus on the word classical here. The main issue, the world has moved in a fundamental way, obviously, in the last 200 years, especially with the advent of modernity, the encroachment of the Western powers on non-Western civilizations, and, of course, recently with the advent of globalization and integration, what appears to be integration of economies, societies, peoples, and cultures. But in many ways, this is a false integration. One of the dire effects of this untrammeled modernity has been to destroy the sense of the unseen that our predecessors and forebears had as a matter of course. Their access to awareness of and knowledge of the unseen was part and parcel of their life in the seen. It was not something that they had to work and strive for. It's not that it was an effortless awareness of the unseen, but the unseen infused people's lives in ways that are not comprehensible now. So when we refer to the classical Sufis or any of the pre-modern figures that light our history and light our legacy and heritage, we find that they use a lexicon, a language, a grammar, which we often find unfamiliar, sometimes painfully unfamiliar, when we examine classical texts to see with what relevance they have to our condition. And of course, we as Muslims revere these classical texts, much more so, I might add, than any other living civilization. To us, the past is really prologue. There are very few people in the West, for example, who read Thomas Aquinas the way that Muslims read Al-Ghazali. And there are even fewer people in other such traditions which have an important public aspects to their faith. So one of the side effects of modernity which has seeped into the Muslim mind is a major demolition of the job of understanding the unseen. And if we do not recover the ability to interact with the unseen through a medium of words, grammar, language, perspective, I'm afraid the unseen to us becomes simply a matter of the tongue. We may strive to it, we may try to realize it, we may hope that we will gain access to it, but this will always be a gift of Allah. The culture itself has been denuded from knowledge, let alone access to the unseen. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran says, and I believe Hafiz Iqbal says this from Surah Al-Hajj, that in translation Allah says, they forgot Allah, so He made them forget themselves. It is really one of the critical ayahs that reflect to the modern condition, is that if you ignore or deny the presence of the sacred in your daily life and your daily actions, then Allah will make you forget the spectrum of the self that recognizes the divine. He did not say He will make you forget Him, because that's not possible. Allah is all. But He makes you forget that aspect of yourself that can reverberate with the presence of the sacred, of the unseen in our lives. And this demolition job, I must say from my experience, is practically universal, except in semi-literate societies or societies that have not been exposed to modern ways. And it's affected language, it's affected perception, it's affected cognition, knowledge of things, and it's affected how we construct models of the outer world with which we interact. I'm afraid that the process has gone to such an extent that it is extremely difficult to see the access to the unseen and the recognition of the sacred in daily life without considerable effort on our part to regain the means by which we access this zone. Of course, the zone, the unseen by its very nature, is not the seen. So we have to be clear, it's not something that you can jump into and jump out of at will. Neither is it open to people to cross these barriers. These barriers exist for a good reason. If the unseen connects with the seen, it will destroy the seen. You cannot exist. Our presence ceases to be in the light of Allah's absolute existence and being. So the barriers are there. The barriers are there to allow us to recognize our time and place, and to recognize at the same time that there is a different zone which is in many ways more real. Here I speak with real, reality with a capital R. So you might also ask, well, what is the point of this zone if we can't move in and out of it? It is precisely the existence of that zone that makes sense out of reality. If we do not believe in the unseen, I do not think we can have a meaningful relationship with the seen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in His infinite wisdom has given man certain tools by which we access this unseen. And of course in Islam we are doubly blessed. Other civilizations before us also had their inalterable means. To us, of course, the means are the Quran. It is the sacred text of the Quran, and its ineffability is the absolute precondition for access to the unseen. Any person or any system within or without Islam that denies the ineffability of the Quran makes that text not useful as a means to the unseen. That is why I'm extremely resistant to ideas of temporalizing the Quran, fixing it in time and space, because once you do that, it no longer has any significance as a book for the unseen. In fact, the Quran starts in Surah Al-Baqarah and it defines the meaning of the muttaqi. The muttaqi is a person who believes in the unseen. If you do not believe in the unseen, there is no point, in fact, reading the Quran except as a code of ethics or as a model of practice. It is no longer relevant as a key to the unseen. So we have this text, and we have to mine this text for isharas, for signals, and for ways and for means by which the unseen becomes real to us in the capital, with a capital R. We have also the sacredness attached to our rituals. The rituals of worship in particular are designed in order for us to sense the sacred. These rituals have no meaning unless they relate to Allah in one way or another. What is the point of going halfway around the world to circumambulate around a stone if it is not to do with knowledge of Allah? What is the point of stopping yourself from eating and drinking throughout the day for a month if that does not heighten your spiritual awareness? So the actions and the worshipful actions are accesses also. Language is another way. The language of the modern Muslims has lost its rootedness in knowledge of the unseen. There are many words, and I think you've heard this before from Sheikh Fadlallah and from others. There are many words whose meanings have been distorted and twisted. Words such as aql, which means to us an intellect, means to us reason, supreme reason, means logic to us. In actual fact, aql is the mechanism by which the intellect understands and translates Allah's signs. The word deen to us is religion in the Western sense, religio as the Latins say. But in actual fact, deen is a transaction. It's to do with debt and indebtedness. It's to do with the indebtedness of the created to the creator. Words such as ilm, knowledge. Ilm to us means science. If you talk to anybody, any Arab or Iranian or any Urdu speaker, ilm to him is basically science. It's to do with the logical interaction with the world. Ilm, of course, is nothing of the sort. It is to do with knowledge of the sacred and knowledge of the unseen and knowledge of ways in which man can aspire to perfected models. The community of Muslims that we had before, even in its very, very small form, such as the community of Muslims in Medina, the Ummah by its very nature has a sacred aspect. That is why Ibrahim alayhi salam, Nabiullah Ibrahim, in the Quran, Allah says he was an Ummah unto himself. He was a single person, but also an Ummah. How many people know that Ibrahim alayhi salam was an Ummah? When you talk about the Ummah, you talk about the Ummah of the Muslim Brotherhood, people going around trying to form large political units in order to conquer the world. But the Ummah is a community of people, including a single individual, if there's nobody else, who organize their lives and affairs in order to recognize the signs of Allah on the horizons and in themselves. The wants and needs of human beings, the effects of modernity has changed, completely shifted what the economists call the patterns of consumption and supply and demand. our wants and needs no longer have a sacred function. They are no longer related to the way in which we see them as accessing the divine. And above all, I think, after the sacred text, which is the Quran, we have lost the idea of the archetype. Models, perfected models. Of course, Sheikh said yesterday that perfection is for Allah, but the perfected form in which human beings are to order themselves in order to approach the perfection of the divine is what I'm referring to. And the archetypes here are the archetypes of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and archetypes of all the great beings that followed in his wake, from Imam Ali onwards. That is why I might add that 13 out of the 14 Sufi tariqas have Imam Ali as their head of. It's not for any other reason. It's not because they are Shia, they're not. It's because Imam Ali is the fount of perfected virtues. One of them has Abu Bakr, another fount of perfected virtues. So these models and archetypes are necessary in order for us to understand what it means to reach the understanding of the sacred in daily lives. Recognizing archetypes or perfected models goes really against the entire modern theory of evolution. It goes against the idea of people moving up in an ever-increasing standard of knowledge, of rationality, of personal evolvement and improvement. I mean, the entire process of the modern mind sees human beings as evolving towards something better. This may be true in material terms. It may be true that we have greater capacity to improve our daily lives through better machines, through better processes, through better technologies. But the opposite process applies in this world of the spirit or the world of the sacred. We don't need to evolve into a better model. The best model already exists. And the nature of Muslims is now not as beings going towards something better, but as beings who have removed themselves away from something that was the best. So we have devolved from the archetypes rather than evolve towards something better. Of course, the modern mind is very, very loath to admit that human beings were better before than they are now, because of course Darwin, above all, tells you that's not the case. We are manifestly superior, at least intellectually, to plants. But that, I'm afraid, does not apply to the realm of the spirit. So if you plot a curve, as it were, what I call the curve of modernity, on the x-axis, the y-axis, you have denial of the unseen, the x-axis is time, and the curve goes down. There's no doubt the reason why we cannot understand the classical texts is not because we don't know the language. Some of them have been translated very well, but because we don't have the perception to understand what they're talking about. To them, it was an effortless, many ways effortless, daily life. It infused their beings. Sheikh Fadlallah talks about the Karbala of his youth. Even I, later, even up to the 1940s and 50s, there was an element of that still. Now what we see is not even an echo. You go to any of the sacred cities of Islam, frankly, you should flee from them, because were it not for the presence of the divine around certain shrines, they are not the places to find upliftment. What is the unseen? From the seen point of view, when we ask ourselves, what do we mean by the unseen? The unseen, of course, is the sacred. That is anything from which the divine effulgence emerges. Of course, when we talk about the divine effulgence, we have to be very clear that the absolute is unknowable. Only Allah knows Allah. But we have the capabilities of recognizing His attributes. And one of them is Al-Quddus, which is the sacred. This is one of the aspects of the unseen that are essential for us to recover. The unseen is also seen as, or witnessed as, the unknown. In many ways, the believing modern mind, say the theists and the deists, see it in these terms. See it as something that it does exist, but somehow we are not entitled to know anything about it, so it becomes unknown. And that any effort beyond striving is really pointless. The unseen as the unknowable. I think this is also a current that captures people's minds, is that it is unknowable, and therefore talk about it is really futile. Of course, the last one is the unseen as the non-existent. This is the rational mind, but I take it one step further and say that the unseen as the non-existent is in fact the heart of the unseen. It is the non-existent because it is being. It is not something which has been prompted into creation. It is the actual creative force. So in many ways, these various aspects of the unseen, that when we talk about the ghaib of the absence of the divine in daily life, the ghaib as the unknown, the ghaib as the unknowable, and the ghaib as the non-existent, or being, that I think is what I'm referring to. So this process of, as it were, the deconstruction of the human mind from its ability to reverberate with the unseen and its access to the unseen has been going on, I say from the modern period because it's accelerated in the modern period. But obviously in the pre-modern times, many things happened that also reduced man's capability, or human beings' capability of engaging with the unseen. I mean, for example, tyranny. Pre-modern societies, including the Muslim world, were riddled with tyrannical regimes, dictatorships, periods of mass killings. I'm just think of, Timur Lane. Timur Lane was a nominal Muslim. He probably killed more people than Hulagu. Now you can't really have access to the unseen if every day marauding armies, attack you. But nevertheless, in the pre-modern period, the ruler's span of control, as it were, was limited. It was limited to where his military power reached and his rather crude or primitive secret police. Beyond that, the ruler did not interfere too much in people's lives, into community affairs, into social affairs. So that core remained intact. What the modern period did is it in fact destabilized and overthrew our traditional systems of perception. It's not that they were better in material terms. They were not. They were obviously manifestly inferior systems for producing goods, for producing services, for improving people's material ones. And sometimes even they were inferior in terms of their political institutions. But the modern world destroyed, or the modern mind was denuded of its ability to understand traditional constructs which allowed for greater access to the unseen. The postmodern mind, which is what affects most people now in the West, and I think increasingly in our part of the world, is to do with really confusion, uncertainty, tentativeness, and these have been elevated to the ranks of guiding principles. It's now people are very proud not to know things. People are very proud to be uncertain about things, to be doubtful about this. We cannot say, the jury is still out. This is part of this whole rubbish of elevating tentativeness to the sacred realm, and sacred in the, of course, secular term. So what you have as a result is really an inversion of the virtues that are embedded in all great religious systems, and I speak also of Islam here in particular, where things like aspects to do with certainty, with serenity, with peace, with righteousness, with fixity, permanence, have been turned into their opposite. And you see people, anxiety, anger, disorientation, aggressiveness, hatred and competitiveness being raised to the defining features of human beings. I mean, the entire aspect of modern psychology is to do with anxieties, how to handle anxieties, how to manage anger management. This seems to be something. Why don't they have serenity management? I don't know, but So all of these aspects, the inversion of virtues, the disorientation that came as a result of us being exposed to different ways of looking at the scene, and the way in which the scene has pushed out this realm, which was real and in many ways spiritually tangible to people, is, I think, a real. When people stopped, I believe for sure, when people stopped 1,000 years ago to do their salat, they were in hudur, with some exceptions, as Hajj Ibrahim said. Of course, you have fleeting thoughts, but I'm sure the fleeting thoughts of Abu Hamid al-Ghazali were 1% of his equivalent today. So what he had was a fleeting thought. What we have is a constant, it's not just camels, it's cars, it's petrol pumps, it's telephone bills, it's university admissions. And what has been the answer of Muslims to this state? And what it has, I'm afraid, has been another accentuation of the distance of the unseen, although through what people think are, in fact, reformist ways in which a Muslim is supposed to reorient himself or herself to access the unseen again. For example, the rise of dogma and doctrine as the defining features of Islam. For the life of me, I can't see how this explicit Sharia-mindedness that is divorced from the spirituality inherent in the nature of transcendence, which is Islam, how that can enhance one's access and spiritual realization. I'm not saying it's not good, but dogma and doctrine now is the defining features of modern Islamist thought, not only amongst the political organizations, and not only amongst the extremist radicals, but both Sunni and Shia. The emphasis on dogma and doctrine as the definition of Islam's true essence, I think, is another process of pushing the Muslim mind away from understanding the sacred. Another way is the rationalizing of religion, that is privileging the notion that Islam is a religion of reason. Of course, a religion of reason, but it's also a religion of unreason, of beyond reason. It is a religion of supra-rationality. It is not just a logical construct. Logic does not lead you to Allah by itself. And I think the modernizing Muslims who see Islam as a kind of alternative form of science is, I think, also causing a great deal of destructiveness to this very subtle sense of the sacred. Humanizing Islam or humanizing religion. This is another sop to the secularists. We're not a humanist religion. We're not. Islam is the and other primordial religions are the ways to Allah. They have nothing to do with lovey-dovey stuff. It's part of a very good side effect of it is the enhancement of virtues, but it is not the essence of it. And here I must say the modern attempt to spiritualize Islam, what I call the neo-Sufi movements, are equally culpable. Again, what Sheikh yesterday talked about, happy clappy Muslims are really happy clappy people, but the sense of the sacred in their daily life, the sense of the knowledge of Allah governing their actions is not there. Sounds rather bleak, but in reality, Allah always gives us a way out in His infinite mercy. And the way out, I think, is to do with transmutations. It's a rather ponderous word, but it means that we have to reconnect through the mechanisms of perception that we have. One of them is language. We have to really discover the roots of these words. What do we mean by deen? What do we mean by ruh? What do we mean by aql? What do we mean? Anything which has been changed from its tool as an access to the divine has to be reinvented, has to be recreated, has to be without language. We cannot express our ideas. We relate to the outside, we relate to others through language, and we relate to the outside world through perception and symbols. And if we don't have these anymore, if our modern mind is what guides us, no matter how many rak'ahs we do, we will not be those who are privileged to have access to the unseen. And I'm not saying, Allah says that in so many instances in the Quran. The Quran, if it is seen as an ineffable text, and I must insist that this has to be the case. This has to be the case for us. Of course, even the Quran vanishes in the face of Allah. But we have not yet reached that point where we can talk about these things. So let's use it as this ineffable text. So, transcending, as it were, the material basis of knowledge, transcending the over-rationalization, the over-logical approach that we have, is essential. The abandonment of cause and effect when we deal with the unseen is absolutely essential, and that may bring me to part of my topic about du'as. If you look at dua as cause and effect, forget it. It does not work. I'm sorry, I'm using Sheikh Falalah's phrase, does not work. But the reason why it does not work, I'll describe to you in very, very simple terms. The heart of dua is what? There are four aspects to it. There is the da'i, that's you, the person who is calling. There is the dua itself, what is it that you are calling for. There is Allah as the sami', the listener, the all listener. And then there is Allah as the mujib, the all responder. Of course, in the hierarchy of names, the sami' precedes the mujib. You have to hear something before you're able to respond to it. If your dua does not break the barriers of causality, I do not believe it will be heard by the sami'. And why should it be? Because it's like being in an echo chamber. You call out. If that echo chamber doesn't have an access door outside, you just get the same words back. And if you get what you ask for, I think then that is where coincidence and chance plays a part. Because your dua has to be transmuted into a different language to cross the barrier from the seen to the unseen, in order that that dua becomes changed, as it were, digitalized, spiritually digitalized into bits and pieces, bits and bytes, sorry, that are then floating, where the sami' in his wisdom will choose to respond or not to respond as the mujib. So is it your dua as an echo chamber, or is it a way through? But this wall, this barrier between the seen and the unseen for the da'i, in many ways I do not do du'as. And I'll tell you why. Because if I'm not sure these barriers have been removed, I don't want to hear my voice speaking. So people say, why don't you do supplications? Well, the supplication, in order for it to break through the echo chamber, there are three conditions for it. First condition is that you shout loud enough so that this wall falls down. And I think this is what those with real fervor and piety do, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it's really energy inefficient. Another way is to find a door. A door. There's always a door in this wall between the seen and the unseen for the specified forms of access. And those of us who can find these doors are, as the Quran says, those of us who are the privileged few. And then there is the third aspect of this wall, which is Sheikh Falalah's aspect, that there is no wall. So what are we talking? There is no echo chamber. All of this I'm talking about is nonsense. There is no echo chamber. There's nothing. There's only Allah. But that's for those who are in a different league than me. So I know of one and possibly of another. So, as I said, you break down the walls through attack on the ramparts, rather heavy-going stuff. Go through the door, which is what we really, all of us, should do, or there are no walls. I think if you look at it that way, if you look at the access, my time is up, so I will bring this to an end. We have to believe that the orders governing this access to the unseen are as real as the laws governing the seen. If we believe that there are physical laws, even if they are indeterminate, that govern the actions of the seen world, then the other orders, which we have abandoned because they seem to be such nonsense. For example, the cosmology of our predecessors, that there are 7 circles and 7 this and 8 of that. But they're not as silly as they sound now. Frankly, modern physics, it may have debunked the effectiveness of ancient cosmology when it comes to the world of causality. But there's a great deal of truth in hierarchies of nature, of the unseen. If we are able to think hierarchically, if we're able to think that there are orders, that there are realms, or there are angelic realms, there are realms of power, there are realms of authority, and there are infinite realms, by the way, they're not 7 or 8 or 14 or whatever, then we are able to go back. Our ancestors, our predecessors, understood cosmology as both being an inner and outer cosmology. And their outer cosmology has been proven to be wrong, actually. In the world of physics, you can't really fly a plane using Aristotle. But you are able to understand the spiritual realms infinitely better by using the cosmology of the great beings, like Ibn Sina, for example, or Biruni. And it is the best way that we can approach this cosmology. Because we have no tangible substance, because we have lost the capability, or partly lost the capability of engaging with the unseen, then we have to deal with it as an allegory. It's an allegorical reality. But that reality is equally real. So, transmutation of language, trying to understand the meaning of terms, trying to understand the Quran as an access to the unseen, trying to rephrase our perceptions or reconfigure our perceptions and our symbols, try to place a cosmology that will help us to understand these hierarchies that exist in creation outside the realm of the unseen, and creating in that way the beginnings of the building blocks for, inshallah, future generations to build on, so that in 100 years' time, the prophetic saying that Islam entered the world a stranger and will leave a stranger may be postponed for a few more decades or centuries, and that we are not the last generation that is able to, as a matter of community, as a matter of ummah, be able to engage with the unseen and the divine. Thank you.
Thank you, Sidi Ali, for mapping out the current contours of where we are in terms of understanding, perceiving the unseen, for mapping out some of the current trends we see within the Muslim world, and also for giving us the pointers for the way out and what's required as an agenda for the future. May I call upon Fawzia to introduce Dr. Sadia Sheikh.